In the Philippines, corruption scandals are nothing new. But few have shaken public trust like the flood control controversy now gripping the nation. What began as a routine audit of infrastructure spending has turned into a nationwide probe, spanning almost a decade, hundreds of projects, and billions of pesos that may have vanished through ghost contracts and substandard construction. On paper, it's about missing money. In practice, it's about how the country governs itself, how deeply corruption is built into the system, and whether the government has the will to investigate its own. This is the story of why the Philippine flood control scandal is so hard to solve, and why any honest probe risks tearing the system apart. From 2016 to 2025, successive administrations poured enormous sums into flood control programs. Billions were earmarked for dams, canals, and drainage systems meant to protect the country from worsening typhoons. But year after year, floods still came. Rivers overflowed, levees broke, and urban drainage systems failed. Communities drowned while budgets kept growing. By 2025, the numbers no longer made sense. The government had already spent hundreds of billions of pesos, yet satellite maps and field inspections showed many projects either unfinished or missing. Some flood control structures existed only on paper. Investigators found procurement anomalies, contracts awarded to the same network of companies, cost inflation up to 5 times normal, and recycled bidding documents. Whistleblowers pointed fingers not only at engineers, but at politicians and agencies all the way up the chain. That's when the Senate and the Independent Commission for Infrastructure, or ICI, stepped in. To understand why this scandal is so hard to unravel, think of it like a map with 3 coordinates: vertical, horizontal, and time span. The vertical coordinate is hierarchy: who gave orders, who approved contracts, who signed off on payments. At the top are cabinet officials and lawmakers who control infrastructure budgets. Below them, implementing agencies: the Department of Public Works and Highways and local district engineers. At the bottom, private contractors, where public money turns into private profit. The horizontal coordinate stretches across hundreds of congressional districts. Each district has its own DPWH office, contractors, and politicians, meaning hundreds of separate paper trails, each one vulnerable to manipulation or destruction. Finally, the time span, 2016 to 2025, covers nearly 10 years, 2 presidents, and countless budget cycles. Some projects began under Rodrigo Duterte's Build, Build, Build. Others continued under Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s Build Better More. Tracing corruption over that long a period isn't just accounting, it's political dynamite. The biggest question in any massive corruption probe is simple: who do you investigate first? Start at the bottom, and you risk losing evidence before it reaches the top. Start at the top, and you could bring down the very institutions funding the investigation. That's the bias problem at the heart of the flood control scandal. Even the order of investigation can be read as politically motivated. If prosecutors begin with opposition-linked figures, critics call it selective justice. If they start with allies, the administration risks implosion. In Philippine politics, loyalty networks rule: dynasties, coalitions, and patronage systems. Going after allies can end careers, destabilize Congress, and stall legislation. So governments tend to investigate the politically expendable first. Those outside the ruling circle. That doesn't prove guilt or innocence. It's the logic of survival. At the center of the investigation are a handful of contractors, and one name keeps surfacing: the Diskaya Group, accused of cornering multiple flood control contracts through shell firms and insider connections. In Senate hearings, the Diskayas invoked confidentiality or declined to answer questions. The ICI flagged their non-cooperation and urged further inquiry. But the problem runs deeper than uncooperative witnesses. The ICI is undermanned, with fewer than 100 auditors covering thousands of project files nationwide. Each missing document can erase months of work. Witnesses allege that some local offices have destroyed bidding papers or backdated reports to cover their tracks. It's a bureaucratic maze built to frustrate accountability. The longer the probe drags, the greater the chance evidence disappears. At first, the Senate probe seemed to have real momentum. Under Senator Rodante Marcoleta, hearings began touching not just contractors, but the possible involvement of figures close to Malacanang. But that direction made some in the Senate uneasy. According to Senator Tito Soto, the committee wasn't going in the right direction. Soon after, Marcoleta was replaced following a dramatic reshuffle that saw then Senate President Jesus Escudero removed and Soto installed in his place. Officially, it was a reorganization, but insiders say it happened because the inquiry was getting too close to the palace. In Marcoleta's place came Senator Panfilo Ping Lacson, a pro-administration lawmaker and a well-known law and order advocate. He was expected to steady the investigation and keep it politically manageable. But the plan backfired. During one explosive hearing, a surprise witness, Orly Guteza, claimed he had delivered cash to both Zaldico and House Speaker Martin Romualdez. The disclosure stunned the chamber. Instead of redirecting blame away from the administration, the probe had swung straight into its inner circle. Within days, Lacson resigned as chair, saying his co-senators were not happy with the way things were going. Observers took that as confirmation that the inquiry had gone beyond political control. Shortly after, the Senate announced that the blue ribbon hearings were suspended indefinitely. Many saw this not as reorganization, but as a shutdown to prevent further damage. When a body becomes uncontrollable, the system centralizes power. And that's exactly what happened next. The investigation was moved out of the Senate's hands. The ICI itself eventually closed its hearings to the public, avoiding outside scrutiny and leaving only the Ombudsman to determine the direction of the probe, who gets investigated and who gets charged first. To steer the scandal toward a more manageable outcome, the palace needed a venue it could contain. A single office with legal authority and limited public exposure. That meant moving the case under the office of the Ombudsman, led by someone the administration could rely on. With critics decrying his partisanship, but allies defending his loyalty, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla was soon appointed to that post, a move many analysts described as the final step in regaining not just narrative control, but control over the very sequence of accountability. By late 2025, the Blue Ribbon Committee was suspended indefinitely for what was called internal reorganization. The Independent Commission for Infrastructure, which has been reviewing flood control projects since its formation, has kept its hearings closed to the public and cancelled all live streams, leaving its findings undisclosed. Critics said this effectively silenced independent scrutiny, leaving only the Ombudsman and the palace's media arm as primary sources of updates. Soon after, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla formally assumed the position of Ombudsman, consolidating control over corruption cases. Under his leadership, official briefings began emphasizing anomalies from the previous administration, framing the scandal as an inherited problem. State-run media amplified that framing, portraying the government as reformer rather than culprit. The message was clear. The story now belonged to the palace. The Senate was paralyzed, the ICI operated behind closed doors, and the Ombudsman's voice became the only one that mattered. For many, this was the moment transparency drowned, not under floodwaters, but under politics. As the Ombudsman took charge, focus shifted again, this time to Senator Bong Go, Duterte's longtime aide. Reports hinted he was being eyed as a possible mastermind behind fund diversions. Investigators cited alleged links between the Discayas and a firm tied to Go's father from the Davao era. Go denied the charges, calling them politically motivated and urging authorities to find the real crocodiles. Whether true or tactical, the shift was clear. Anger was redirected from the present toward the past. The media, the supposed fourth power, also shaped the story. Mainstream outlets, independents and influencers covered the scandal, but their narratives diverged sharply. Some portrayed it as proof of government sincerity. Exposing corruption shows strength. Others saw a cover-up, a campaign sparing friends while punishing foes. On social media, misinformation spread faster than verified facts. Edited clips, fake documents, and partisan memes shaped perception long before investigations concluded. The result was a chaotic information ecosystem, where outrage fueled both reform and paralysis. Every side claimed moral victory, while truth drowned in noise. Despite the confusion, one thing is clear: the public is angry. Polls show that 9 in 10 Filipinos believe corruption is widespread at all levels. Protests echoed across Manila with a single chant: corruption kills. Every peso lost to graft is a life at risk when floods come. The missing barriers and drains aren't abstractions, they're deadly absences. The public demanded transparency, either through a restored Senate probe or a fully open ICI inquiry. But reforms remain promises, and justice feels delayed or denied. Can the Philippines clean up a corruption web this vast? Experts say yes, but only under strict conditions. Protect whistleblowers even with amnesty. Digitize and publish all infrastructure data for citizen audits, and insulate investigators from political interference. Without these, the probe may die like so many before, buried in fear and compromise. Because the flood control scandal isn't just about money, it's about loyalty over accountability. A government that fears truth more than failure, and a people caught between outrage and resignation. Whether the investigation succeeds or collapses will define not only the Marcos administration, but the nation's political future. When corruption spans 10 years, 10 regions and 2 presidencies, one analyst said, justice can't move fast, but silence moves faster. Until the silence breaks, the floods, both literal and political, will keep rising. And perhaps that is the real tragedy of power. No leader can demolish the system from where he stands. The moment he starts tearing down his own platform, the system will tear him down first. That's why in the Philippines, every crusade against corruption stops just short of home.